Arkansas's basketball season unfortunately came to a close today as they fell to South Carolina. But on a positive note, Arkansas baseball and softball picks up the SEC schedule this weekend as they open conference play. Baseball with Missouri, softball with Auburn. And we've got spring football news. Coach Pittman and they had another practice today in Razorback Stadium where they did live tackling. We'll give you updates on all that in today's show and much more. Welcome into episode 69 of the Woo Pig Weekly Podcast, your go-to podcast for an in-depth dive into all things Arkansas Razorbacks. Join us as we dissect the victories, analyze our plays, and revel in the spirit of the Hogs. And we can't forget episode 69 is brought to you by Homefield. Step into the legacy of collegiate style with Homefield's premium vintage apparel. Embrace the spirit of your alma mater or favorite team with our meticulously crafted, comfortable, and stylish collection. Elevate your game day attire and celebrate the rich history of college sports. Homefield, where tradition meets modern comfort in every stitch. You can use promo code Variety Sports in all caps to receive 15% off that first order. Go check them out today. And we'll just jump right in. Arkansas spring football is here. You know, there's a lot of optimism and positivity going into this next season with a lot of changes. You know, KJ is no longer with the program as he transferred out. You've got a new offensive coordinator with Bobby Petrino. You've got a lot of new faces that, you know, we've talked to some of them. If you remember our Hog Talk with Taylon Green, Addison Nichols, several of those guys that have come in and should make a difference to the program this year. You know, you've got some youth on the defensive side of the ball where we had several guys leave. You know, one of our true leaders on the defense, Chris Paul, left to go to, you know, Ole Miss. So there's a lot of youth on that side of the ball. And so we'll just jump in here with they had a spring practice today in Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium where they did live tackling. And the first thing that stands out to me was there's been some clips on social media you saw where Taylon Green had a 60-yard bomb to Isaiah Satania, and it looked fantastic. And you just got to love, even though that's just one play, one little clip, but it's a big play, and we didn't see many shots like that this past season. So that kind of gives you some optimism in what this program and what Bobby Petrino's offense might be able to turn this offense into compared to last season.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think that's kind of everybody's optimism, hope, expectation, you know, kind of a combination of all those words, if you will, is that we have a little bit more of a dynamic and a little bit more of an explosive offense. I think, you know, everybody's thinking we're going to be an air raid. I don't know if that's necessarily the case. I do think, you know, kind of Petrino does like to run the ball as well. But I think we can have a better balance with some of those deep shots and things of that nature mixed in, more so than we've seen the last couple of years. And that clip you showed, I mean, if anything like that is able to perform at a consistent level between Taylon and some of the receivers or whoever's really quarterback, I think that competition is still definitely ongoing. You know, a lot of the talking heads are speculating that Taylon is the starter as of right now, but I think there's quite a bit of competition left to be had. That said, though, if they can continue those types of connections on those deep routes and things, that's going to make for a really fun season if they're able to connect on a lot of those game in and game out. So I was excited to see that. You know, it is one kind of cherry-picked play that they post on social media. It does get everybody excited, but the fact that they're able to kind of get that type of connection, it was a very nice play. If we're able to see that grow, that gives me, you know, a lot of hope that we're going to have a little bit more of a balanced approach this year for sure.
That's true. And I've heard of a lot, you know, like you mentioned from those heads talking and everything, that Taylon's much more of a vocal leader than maybe some thought he would come in and be. You know, there's been a lot of bonding between, you know, him, his offensive line, even just offensive line themselves. I mean, I saw a quick interview that they did with him the other day where they were talking about, you know, they've got to be the closest group or unit on the field for this team to have success. Because if they can't function as one ultimate unit, then whoever, it doesn't matter if it's Talon, it doesn't matter if it's Jacoby, Malachi, whoever's behind center, or just like KJ last year, it doesn't matter who's going to be behind there. If that offensive line is not operating as one unit and everybody's on the same page, you're going to see the same struggles we had last year. But I think this year you see a reset in guys that we have that's going to be on this offensive line. You have Fernando Caminota from San Jose State. You have Keyshawn Blackstock that came over from Michigan State. You've got Addison Nichols that we talked to from Tennessee. And you got a couple of young returners that are going to be vying for playing time as well. So you've got a whole new unit that, if you're really thinking about it, you're taking a reset from last year. You don't have that many of those guys back. You got a fresh start with several new guys and guys that are more experienced or a little bit older guys that can come in and kind of bring some experience, but also, be able to come in and run and protect the way that they properly need to.
Yeah, that's very true, and that really is the biggest need, in my opinion. That we've had to reload at some skill positions, and quarterback, being one of those main ones. You running back also still have some decent running backs, but went out and addressed some needs in the portal there as well. But like you said, none of that will click. None of that can go well. None of those guys can perform how they need to unless you are, a little bit more shored up front in the trenches. And I think that's kind of what they are targeting the most, is resetting the culture. That's kind of the terminology that I've really heard been thrown around a lot between some of the coaches, some of the players, and some of those interviews is the culture shift has maybe kind of gotten back to where it needed to be. I think, I'm not going to say there were like locker room cancers, but I think there was some negative things going on in the locker room last year that really had a contribution to maybe some lack of effort from time to time, just non-communication from time to time. Now, I think that was a big piece, is there wasn't good enough communication across the line, from the line to the quarterback to, all the way on down, that nobody was recognizing blitz packages, pressure schemes, things like that. And that, without being able to communicate any of that pre-snap, you're setting yourself up for failure on each individual play. And then you zoom that back out big picture, and just the culture piece of it just really didn't seem like it was there. So everything that we've been hearing, everything that we've seen in some of the interviews and some of the in-practice videos and things, seems like that culture shift has gotten back in the right direction. A lot of people with ties that are inside that locker room have said that. So that's a good thing to hear. I think that's something that was critically needed, to kind of get back to fun football, where that we are one team mentality. I think we lost a little bit of that last year, and that could be huge for us, to kind of get back on the right track, just on the culture side of things. And then you tie that into a fresh slate from blocking schemes, understanding maybe a new offensive style with Petrino, getting everything to kind of click together. Everybody's got a lot to learn, but from what everybody's saying, we're ahead of schedule on the offensive side of things, on learning the plays, understanding each other's jobs, so you know what to expect from your teammate next to you. That way, everybody's kind of clicking on all cylinders, if you will. So I've heard nothing but good things and exciting things so far, from all facets, whether it's X's and O's or the culture side of things.
Yeah, and then when you think about it, when you look at your skill players that you've got a ton of experience returning and some talent incoming. You got all your starting receivers that caught passes last year returning. You've got most of your running back room returning, with the exception of Rocket with him leaving. And you got your tight ends coming back, a lot of youth there. And so you can't help but be hopeful with the experience that you got there, but also youthfulness. David Dozier is a guy that we kind of talked about last year that had a lot of praise in fall camp. And then ultimately he got hurt right before season started. Well, he's a guy that's showing flashes in these first few practices. He's really working at it, and he's going out there and showing it, and he's going to be vying for some playing time. It's one of those things where he really wants it. He thought he was going to get that chance last year. Ultimately got struck with the injury bug, but now he's back healthy again and making plays in spring ball, showing Coach Pittman that injury is not really affecting him, and he's back. You think about the running back room. We brought in Quentin Jackson from Utah. You got freshman Braylon Russell that, he's been said to be going to be a part of this offense as a freshman. You got Dominion returning. You got Dominic Johnson returning. Isaiah Gustave, who showed flashes in those last few games. And then tight ends, you got Luke Haas coming back 100% healthy. A note is he's got an ankle sprain. He rolled his ankle in practice today, but he should be fine. You got Varkey's Gums that they said he's taken some steps forward this year. You got Ty Washington that he hasn't been cleared to practice yet, but he should in the next week or so. They're going to have spring break and then come back. I believe the 26th is when they'll start back practice, and he should be able to do more then. And then you got Andreas Puski, the tight end that came in as well. That's going to be more of your blocking tight end. And so you look at that, and it makes you hopeful. And I think the offense is going to be the more comfortable side of the ball going into next season. You've got a point here, WooPig 0-0. What about the defensive side of the ball? So let's talk about that. You flip over to the defensive side of the ball. The biggest thing for me that's going to be important this year is you've got Landon Jackson back. That is going to be 100%. He's got to be that field general, that leader on the defense. And you've got a couple other guys returning. Cam Ball is another big one. Eric Gregory, two guys that are veteran guys that have been in this program before that have been stepping up in practice. The biggest concern to me, and I know Pittman said he wants to go out and get one or two more guys, is in that linebacking room. So you've got to look at that. Good mention here, the defensive end from Albany. I don't necessarily know how to pronounce his name, but he put up some big numbers in that Albany. And so, if he can do what he did at that level and pair up that with Landon Jackson, I think you're going to have a dynamic duo there. But then you look at that linebacking room, you've got Brad Spence, a guy that, played off and on last year, but is a really physical guy. You've got some freshmen that are coming in. It's just a very, very young and not super experienced linebacking room. And then you jump back to our secondary. That's where you've got the most returnees. You with the exception of Nudie and Walcott, you've got your entire secondary from last season back. You've got Hudson Clark back. You've got Jaheim Singletary back. You've got Snacks Johnson back.
Jalen Braxton,
that's a big one. Jaden Johnson.
Piece.
Danico Slaughter, the transfer from Tennessee. And so you look at that secondary, I think will be fine. It's like we've mentioned that linebacking room is definitely one that is going to be the biggest question mark that I think could be what could we run into problems. And not to mention the linebacker room, you got one guy of experience from Georgia that has played off and on there. But he's your really only experienced guy. Yeah, we got the transfer from South Alabama in our secondary that should come in and be able to make some noise as well. So it's one of those things. Defense, I think, to me, is going to be the side of the ball I'm interested to see how it develops over the rest of the spring ball and as we go through summer practice and into fall camp.
Yeah, the one thing that I do want to kind of bring up, some personnel changes are going to be question marks. There's no doubt about that at all. But if the coaching staff is able to kind of get these guys to gel together, similarly how they did last year. Last year, same situation. There was a lot of fresh faces out there with some transfers coming in. Obviously, several from TCU. You had Jaheim Thomas, I believe it was, coming from Cincinnati. So there was quite a few fresh. Jalen Braxton was a freshman last year, for example.
Antonio Greer.
Yeah, there was a lot of fresh faces last year that had to learn how to play together and gel well together. And I think the coaching staff did a great job at that. Same coaches are there for the most part. And so I think if they showed us anything last year, that they can take a new group of guys, get them to work well together, get them to understand defensive scheming, the positioning, things of that nature, maybe we're in good hands. Only time will tell how the players fit into SEC level of play. You just don't know that until you see that. But as far as the coaching staff being able to prepare these guys, I do have faith in that. So I think that's something that we can, kind of maybe put a little bit of trust into and not worry as much about the defensive side as maybe my gut wants me to worry with all these fresh faces. I'm hoping, that they're able to kind of pull the same turnaround, same mechanism that they did last year with all the fresh faces that really unified well together, I thought, and played as a cohesive unit for the majority of the season.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you got to think about it. The defense side of the ball, you didn't really lose any coaching staff from that side of the ball compared to where it seems like the offensive side is overhauled, especially with a whole new entire type of system coming in. So I have confidence in Coach Williams and having that defense ready. I mean, we saw it last year. It seemed like they got better and better as the season went. Even with some of the struggles they may have had, they were still able to, keep us in a lot of those games. Even though we didn't get blown out a ton, but like a game that stands out to me, and I know they weren't their normal selves this year, but you look at the game we had against Alabama. Our defense kept us in that game when our offense was doing diddly squat. I mean, that's just honest truth. That's what they did all season. And we only lost by a touchdown? 10 points to that game. So our defense did a big job in keeping us in all those games that we were in this past season. It was the offense that was the problem, where we couldn't score enough to get those wins. You look at, if this offense was, 20% better, we might have had 2, 3, 4 more wins.
Yeah, you're at 6, 7 wins potentially, because you got Mississippi State. That should have been a win with how well the defense held them. I mean, prime example right there. Sorry to cut you off, but
no, you're good. BYU's another game. And so it's one of those things where hopefully, and I feel confident that Bobby Petrino is going to come in and get things straightened out. It was reported that in practice today, there was reports out there as we hired him that he kind of maybe had mellowed out, calmed down a little bit than what he, had been before when he was here, that type of very aggressive. Well, in practice today, if you watch some clips of practice, you could really hear him being vocal in practice and getting after guys, telling them to do your jobs, get on the line, let's go, getting after these guys and not just kind of being a little lackadaisical, I guess it would be the term. So you're going to see some glimpses of, if you will, quote unquote, the old Bobby Petrino that's going to get after these guys and make them work. But I don't know how much of that we're going to see necessarily on the sidelines during games. That we definitely need to see more of it after last year of not really anybody getting after guys on the offense. When they'd have a bad possession come off, they'd kind of just go sit on their benches and, get a little talk with, whoever it is on the offensive side of the ball. And then that was about it. Or Sam would come over and kind of just be calm, like encouraging. But at some point, you've got to have somebody that's going to come over there, hold you accountable, and get after you to do better.
Yeah, that's really true. And I think two things I want to hit on before we, move on to basketball and stuff real quick was he has mellowed out some, but I think that Bobby Petrino that coaching style is still there. He knows it's what's gotten him the level of success that he's had in his career. That's not going to change. And one of the biggest things that I've heard that he's tried to implement in practices and things is practicing with speed will translate to playing the game with speed. And that's what you're seeing in some of those clips is he's trying to get the guys to build that muscle memory of doing things quickly without even have to think about, am I doing this correct? That's not the question. It's, am I doing this at the pace that I need to be doing it, as far as getting to the line to where they're able to run tempo if need be, then slow down, then kind of have that alternating approach on the tempo side of the things. So I think that he's trying to get that muscle memory built on playing perfectly as far as understanding your assignments, but then doing it with pace. And that wasn't there last year. So that's one thing that I've heard and seen both from some of the clips that we've been shared with, and also some of the insiders that have been talking about the changes that he's kind of introduced in practice. And then outside of Petrino, something that I think that everybody needs to really appreciate and pay attention to is Pittman has really had a lot more hands-on approach with the offensive line coaching so far in these practices. That's something that's been documented already, that he's had a lot more hands-on involvement with them. I think he trusts Petrino maybe more so than he did Dan and Kendall to kind of just handle the entire, skill side of things. I'm going to work with the offensive line. That's where our heaviest need is. So him and Coach Mateos have really been focusing there. And that's something that I, wanted to kind of share. And that should be something that I think the fans appreciate. That's something that there was a drastic need at, obviously player improvement, new personnel potentially, and then I think better coaching preparation. And so we're seeing a lot of those boxes getting checked in these early practices. That's something exciting to see. How will that translate into the season? We'll just kind of have to see how that goes. But a lot of the things that I've been seeing from these practices give me a lot of encouragement for sure.
Yeah, that's one thing that you've got to have this year is with, Pittman being regarded, into last year as not if not the best, but one of the best offensive line coaches in the country. He's going to have to, especially maintain that reputation going into this year, and especially with how bad our offensive line was last year. It's great to see him being hands-on with this offensive line, especially with the new offensive line coach coming in that has been at Arkansas before, way back, and has been around a little bit, but also, Pittman just being over there and taking some extra time with that position group to make sure we don't have a repeat of last year where, I guess himself in a sense was getting called into question about, like, you're supposed to be one of the best in the country. So where is this at? Why aren't you spending more time with the offensive line? Well, we see this early in spring ball. I'm sure we're going to continue to see that throughout fall or spring, summer, and fall as we get ready to roll into the season. Another personnel change that we haven't got to highlight on big was we lost running back coach Jimmy Smith, unfortunately, late last week into this week. There's some rumors starting that he was going to leave for TCU. Ultimately, he did. I believe it was Monday that it officially dropped that he did leave. He was at Arkansas practice on Monday, and by the end of that day, he was already moved on to TCU, or it was announced. But Arkansas didn't waste any time. Brought in a familiar face, Colby Smith, a guy that he just came off being in the NFL with the Miami Dolphins for 3 seasons in that running back room, having plenty of experience as a running backs coach in college, where he spent several years with Petrino at Louisville as the running backs coach. He was at Rutgers as a running backs coach at Western Kentucky. And then he was actually a GA here at Arkansas back in, I believe, like 12-13. So he's a guy that he knows Arkansas. He's been around Petrino. It's just another guy that I feel like the familiarity is going to be good for this staff to be able to cohesively function as a good unit, because you've got to think Petrino brought in Ronnie Fouch, who he been with him at Louisville and Missouri State. You've got now Colby Smith that been with him at Louisville. You've got you retained your tight ends coach from last season, who's one of the top ones in the country that's put several guys in the league, and you brought in Eric Mateos. So this offensive staff has been overhauled in a sense, except for maybe like one position grouping. But besides that, they're all very familiar with Petrino and how he likes to operate. I think that's just going to allow them to be a step ahead compared to if you just brought in somebody that's a really talented coach but hasn't been around Petrino before.
I think that's a good take, and something that I think everybody knew that in the back of their head, that they needed to have a little bit of a head start, if you will, because the turnaround does need to be now. And I hate to have that, that level of pressure on them, but you can't have another, 3 or 4 win season after what happened last year. There is going to have to be somewhat of an immediate turnaround to get 5, 6, 7 wins. I think that's kind of the range of what needs to happen. 5 would maybe be a disappointment, but at least an improvement. I think getting to 6-6 and going bowling is really what needs to happen this year, or better. And I think that's the expectation from everybody involved. And so I think that was realized and taken with, a grain of salt whenever they made some of these hires, that we need to have a little bit of a head start, get some guys that understand the Bobby Petrino lingo and can really kind of help coach the players up and get the players to learn the Bobby Petrino lingo, all at the same time. So it's not Petrino having to teach everyone, something new all at one time. So I think that was a smart move. I'm hoping it translates into, rapid success. That's the goal. But we'll, Jerry's going to still be out on that until we play the games. That's why the games are on the schedule.
Yeah, that's true. And I think, I'm going to go a little bit further as to say, I think you've got to win at least 7 games next year for Sam Pittman. If you want to be comfortable with, you think you're going to have your job for another season.
Does that 7th count as a bowl game win? Maybe. I mean, I don't know.
That's a toss up. I almost think it needs to come regular season. And I know that's a big ask, but from what you put out on the field last year, and you're going to have with it, a lot of things coming into question last year, you want to come out and prove that, yes, you are the guy that's going to, yes, last year was a bad year, but we're going to turn it right back around and get back to, where we are not dead last in the SC, where, we're right up there, hopefully competing middle of the pack or higher. I don't want to be middle of the pack, but from how last year was, I think
that
we
would be an
need to,
improvement.
yeah. And so with that, there's not a lot left. They're going to finish up spring practice this week. We're going to go into spring break, and I believe, like I said, they'll return the 26th, start working on some more things. And once they return, they're going to start having practice on Saturdays and / scrimmages, and those will be open to the public. So we're going to get out there and try to be at those, give you all the information we can, see some live action in person instead of just clips and videos that we get to see. So that'll be good. And so with that, we'll move over to basketball, where it is what it is at this point. The season, Arkansas men's basketball and women's basketball both done for the year. We'll highlight it really quickly. Arkansas women's basketball lost their opening round game in the SEC tournament to Auburn. They lost 67-48. Not a high scoring game here, but the way they were trending towards the end of the season, you didn't think it seemed like they kind of had just the gas had run out of the tank in a sense. That they'd done really well beginning half the season. They sputtered a little bit in the middle, and then right there towards the end where they really needed to bounce back, they just couldn't do it. They couldn't find whatever it was. So now the question is, does Mike Neighbors get another season? Nothing's been said yet. You got Talia Scott, a talented recruit. Can you get another good recruiting class along with what will remain? Can you retain players, keep them from transferring if he does stay? It's one of those things. He's been in this program for several years now, so it's almost getting to make or break. You gotta start winning on a consistent level and make the tournament and be able to do more than just lose opening day of the SEC tournament.
Yeah, I think the biggest question that, the fans and I mean, not necessarily the fans, but like the powers that be, whether it's Yurchek or a combination of people, need to ask, how long are we content with mediocrity? I guess would be kind of the right way to put it. Very Mike Anderson-esque feeling, like he was never really a bad coach, and we had some pretty good games and decent seasons here and there, but it's like we never really could get over the hump. And so I think you kind of have to ask that same question with Neighbors here, where it's like we're actually doing well in certain games, having good recruiting classes, having borderline decent seasons and whatnot. But how long is that enough? That's the question that I think is going to have to be asked. And maybe the breakthrough is right around the corner. I don't know. I don't hate Mike Neighbors by any stretch, but I'm not just the biggest fan either. Kind of middle of the pack. I think that's the way a lot of the fan base feels. But that said, if you do let Mike Neighbors go, who do you get to fill his shoes? It's not like Arkansas is necessarily a destination women's basketball coach like Mike could be touted as a men's basketball coach. The history is just not quite as much there as it is, it's like a South Carolina and LSU, places like that, UConn or something. So, I think they've got to examine the market and see, what's even realistic. And are we okay with another couple of years of the Mike Neighbors experiment as far as, can we get over this hump of just kind of being middle of the pack? So I was pleased with how our players played this year, especially in some of the games early on when Talia Scott went out, and it seemed like everyone else was starting to find some rhythm. That was a pretty fun stretch of the season. Won some games in there, even without Talia Scott, and that was cool. Everybody was stepping up, and that was something that we really talked about quite a bit, and some things to look back on and be proud of for sure. But overall, definitely finished the year with not the best taste in the mouth with the way the last 2-3 weeks of the season went.
Yeah, that's true. So we'll see what happens. Like I said, there's been not any news or even rumblings of Mike's getting let go, things of that nature. And I think this year was definitely an improvement from last season, where last season was so much inconsistency. You saw more consistency this season. Plus, like we said, he was able to land Talia Scott. We've got the overseas player that's coming in that's supposed to be really touted. And you got to look at maybe what does he do recruiting wise or even transfer portal wise. He does need to fill out this roster more. I know we struggled with depth this year as we didn't have a full team of scholarship players. We had a few walk-ons and things of that nature. So I think he's going to have to continue to build this roster, but also make sure he's filling all those roster spots. That's going to be key going in if you want depth, especially if you want to compete at the level of these, the South Carolinas, the LSUs. You see their bench, they have so much depth. And even with that depth, one thing doesn't drop off from, one group or one person, your 6th, 7th, 8th man. They don't drop off a ton. So that's what he needs to do as we go into next season. And so as we flip over men's basketball, to say anything that this year's been anything short of a massive disappointment would be an understatement, just because, in the offseason, preseason leading up into this year, we were talking national title hopes, Final Four hopes with the talent that had come in and things of that nature, and then you turn around and we get to the end of the season, the SEC tournament, you're playing day one against Vanderbilt
and barely winning.
And barely win that in overtime to advance to the next round, where you play a South Carolina team that came into Bud Walton and just outplayed you with a second-year coach with Lamont Paris, who really turned that program around. But still, that's not an excuse with the talent that was on this team. 80-66 today. I honestly don't think South Carolina, as far as talent-wise, is 14 points better than we are. So it's one of those things where what went wrong, if you will. It's one of those things where with the talent that was here, you let's walk through this. You get Tremont Mark from a Houston team that you think he'd bring in that experience, been there, kind of done that mentality. You get Trevor Brazile that's supposed to return, and we got a sample size of what he was going to be like last year. You thought, Devo coming back, he was going to be that leader on the court, that glue, if you will, that would hold guys together. You've got Khalif Battle that came in and was supposed to be a highly touted scorer, lights out from the free throw line, shooting high 90% just there, being able to score. And, he was averaging double digits off the bench. You brought in Kai Mitchell Ellis, a guy that was supposed to come in and be your experienced point guard that would be able to kind of run this offense. You had youngsters like Layden Blocker, Bayfall. He wasn't necessarily expected to do much, but Layden Blocker was the one that you thought would come in and be able to contribute early. And then when you start looking at things like this, and you got Chandler Lawson that was a late addition from Memphis that was going to be a role player, you start looking at these, and on paper, you're like, okay, we've got a solid roster here. We got a lot of depth. Jeremiah Davenport, another that just popped in my head. You brought him over from Cincinnati. That's supposed to be a shooter. You look on paper, this team looks really solid. You got a lot of depth. You're 6, 7, 8, 9 guys deep. This shouldn't be an issue. You even have Jalen Graham return that was supposed to have made tremendous improvements in his game, especially on the defensive side. And then you come out, you beat Purdue early. So everybody, that added fuel to that fire of this is going to be a national title contending team. And then a few games into the season, you lose to UNC Greensboro. And that kind of leaves everybody scratching their head and like, is this maybe that one early season loss that Arkansas typically has? And then they kind of move on. Kind of, it was a reality check, if you will, or a kind of, yes, we are beatable. Let's learn from this game and not let it happen again. You go to your, non-conference tournament where we went to the Bahamas. You struggle there. You beat a Stanford team in double overtime that really shouldn't have been that hard to beat. You lose to North Carolina. They're a really talented team that's ranked in the top 5 right now. But then you come back home, you're like, okay, they didn't go how we planned. You get Duke at home. You come out, you beat Duke.
You think the ship is righted.
Right. That was a big matchup at home in Fayetteville that, was going to be a big game for us. The history there, everything of that nature. Then we struggled the game in Little Rock. You get to conference play. We open conference play with Auburn coming to Bud Walton and get blown out by 30. That's where, if you hadn't
it really went downhill.
Right. If you hadn't already been worried at this point, then you're really kind of shocked, essentially. And that's really where things kind of went off the rails. You had Khalif Battle. He had several good 20-point games, prior to conference play starting up. He disappears as the first half of conference play. Tremont Mark is the only one really helping you out. You've got Brazile not playing consistent. I mean, what do you think there on, some of your takes on this season and kind of how, looking at where we started the preseason expectations and kind of where we ended, losing second round of the tournament, finishing under 500 on the season.
Well, like you said at the very beginning, I mean, from the biggest picture approach, this was a very disappointing year. I don't know how else to really spin it other than that. The expectations at the beginning of the season, looking back, I think were too high. It's always fun to, at the beginning of the year, look at your roster, look at who you got returning, look at guys' stats from the previous year, and here they've made improvements and this and that and the other, and really kind of get hyped up and set the expectations that, hey, we're gonna make it to the Final Four, we're potentially gonna make a national championship run. Maybe we got a little ahead of ourselves there. However, you do have to look at the history of what Musselman was able to do the previous 3 years, and it doesn't feel like it should have been unrealistic to expect somewhat of a deep NCAA tournament run, whether that's round of 32, Sweet 16 again, maybe the Elite 8 again. That to me felt like where the expectations should have been and where we should have gotten to with the talent. You can't deny there is a lot of talent on this roster. It just did not click. Something along the way never clicked. I think a lot of it, if you want to just kind of sit there and not necessarily point fingers, but try to dissect it, I think we never had point guard play. Even though we'd see signs here and there when Minifield would come in, and it seemed like he kind of helped spark Mitchell, and Mitchell did have a strong finish to the end of the year. It still never really felt like we had like true point guard type leadership where there was offensive plays called by the point guard, for example, and ran. We slowly kind of figured out, pick and roll was working for us some at the end of the year. And we did win some games at the end of the year here and there. And then we lost some games that we shouldn't have at the end of the year as well. Some of the Vanderbilt games come to mind. The overtime win was nice, but we probably should have lost that game just the way we played in the first half. But anyway, that's kind of getting too much into the weeds. So just from the season standpoint, to me, it felt like the players were there. It felt like the coaching was there. It just somehow along the way, I think the leadership piece is what we really lost. If you really kind of dive down into the team itself, all the talent, all the role players, the leaders, as far as scorers and guys that could, kind of get you a bucket at will, whether it's Battle, Tremont Mark, Brazil, whoever, all that was there. It's just, I think the leadership from like the team's morale, effort, culture, those intangible things that aren't really statistically measurable, that was up and down all year long. It never felt like we had any consistency, not in and not out, on who was the vocal leader that was holding this team accountable. I mean, I think the coaches tried, but I just don't. I think even there needs to be some improvement from that standpoint too. But you do have to have some players that kind of rally themselves together and hold each other accountable. And I think we saw that in some games, and then saw the exact opposite of that in some games. And that was kind of the definition of the season. It was such a roller coaster. We'd come out and play great one game, and then follow it up with two absolutely abysmal performances, and then somehow bounce back and have a really good game. And then it was just very, very inconsistent. And I think it came down to the leadership side of things more so than the X's and O's and shots made and whatnot. Because if you really go back and look at a lot of our statistics on the season, we shot pretty well in almost all the games as far as percentages goes. There were very few games we were like low 30s. Every game it was like we were shooting 40, 45% plus from the field, 30, 35 from three. Free throws were hit or miss here and there, but overall, I felt like our shooting percentages were decent. It was just some of the effort things that were lacking, just if you look at the year as a total. But a lot of work to be done. We could sit here and talk to her blue in the face on things that need to happen for next year. A lot of work to be done. I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you saw glimpses of what this team could be. If you had Battle playing consistent like he has down the stretch here, with a 40-point game followed up by 2 or 3 30-point games, you have maybe a different season. You saw flashes of we scored 100+ points against Kentucky and things like that. And, you saw glimpses of what this team could be. But like you said, you didn't really have that leader on the floor because your coaches can only do so much. They're not on the floor with you. You didn't have anybody vocal, kind of getting on guys, if you will, being like, hey, come on, let's step it up, things like that. Maybe you saw glimpses of guys trying to do that, but it didn't seem like really anybody was invested to being in that role in what a lot of people assumed Devo would have been this year. And that really wasn't the case. Devo was very up and down this year. One of his most inconsistent years, I think, unless you look back to maybe his freshman, sophomore year. And then his whole leaving the team incident probably didn't help that team chemistry either, putting things into question late in the season. And so, like you said, I think there's a lot of work to be done. And if anybody caught Coach Muss's press conference, he said he ended that press conference with, if you watched it till the very end, he said he'd never been in a situation like this before. He'd never had a losing season in college basketball before, even back to his days at Nevada. And he said that it stings. He'd never been in it. It's a whole new game. But he ended that press conference by saying that he's excited to get back to work. He's going to work harder than ever and ready to get back to work for next season, which tells me, I know there's been a lot of rumors and smoke out there that he's leaving, things of that nature. He's going to take the Louisville job, which still has never really made any sense to me, because why would you want to go to Kentucky and play but little brother to Kentucky or that runs that state when you could be the only big team here at Arkansas. And I think that kind of maybe, unless like we talked before the show, unless somebody just comes and throws a big bag at him, I think he's back another season. And I personally want him back. I don't think one bad year should alt him to, oh, it's time to go. He can't do this anymore. I don't think that's the case. I think you bring him back, let him do his thing, run the portal like he should. Maybe we missed on the portal this year, not necessarily. Some of the guys that were questionable that we brought in, LS might be one of those guys. Chandler Lawson, he played some here and there. Dennis J. Harris is a guy that kind of really confused me why we brought him on. Not a lot of playing time. But with that being said, I have the confidence in Muss. This is one bad year out of, you even look at the past 3 he's been here at Arkansas, his time at Nevada. He's always able to turn things around. And I think this is just an odd year where, you had the talent, the pieces there, but for something that they just could not work. And, that is probably, some on him, but I think it's a lot on those players too. Not saying anything bad against those players, but for some reason they just couldn't find a way to work together and play as a team. Khalif Battle in the post game, he even said something. They asked him his opinions on the South Carolina team, and his answer was they played as one. They played as a team, and that's ultimately what this Arkansas team could not do.
Yeah, one thing I'll hit on that I think was a play that happened this afternoon in that South Carolina game that literally kind of summed up the season, if you will, just in one play. We had a fast break, got a turnover, come down the court. Tremont Mark dribbles around the three-point line with the ball and shoots not a great shot, kind of step back, contested 3 that didn't even hit the rim. It just kind of bounced off the side of the backboard. And the camera pans over to Musselman, who just slams his hand down on the scoring table. Obviously, that was not the possession that he wanted there. And you had somebody that, kind of like we said, we didn't have really good point guard play to actually run offensive sets. We were just out there kind of playing street ball from time to time. And that was a prime example of that. And it kind of summed up how our season was, if you will, just kind of weird, honestly. So the frustration, I think, was there from everybody off and on all year. And I do want to give a lot of props to the players. I know we've sat here and kind of bashed certain aspects of them quite a bit. But if you look at the last couple of weeks, there wasn't a lot to be playing for. And there were some games that we come out and really fought hard in, won a couple of them, had some close losses in a couple of them. The Kentucky game's prime example, where, this team never did roll over. And I do want to give them their credit as far as that goes before we kind of move on from basketball. And I think that's a testament to the coaching. I think it's a little bit of a testament to some of the players that, we didn't have the in-game leadership of holding each other accountable, maybe how we should have, but they never really quit, in my opinion. There were some games where it looked like we kind of did here and there, but like overall, I still think they were coming out there, really had a lot of pride in the way they played, had a lot of pride playing for the University of Arkansas. You could see that in some of these later in the season games that, to me, would have been tough to force that, type of can't think of the word really, that type of effort, I guess would be the right terminology there. And so I do want to give them their credit as far as that goes, but there did need to be a lot more development from team chemistry, from plays being ran, overall offensive scheming. It just, from time to time, it just felt like it was lacking, and the guys depended on their athleticism maybe a little bit too much. And yeah, Muss went out and got some athletes, but that doesn't always translate into wins when you're playing some very well coached team SEC basketball. So got some things to improve on. Like I said, it's time to go to work. It's going to be tough. Going to have to make a couple of changes. I think that might be hard, and then see if we can kind of bounce things back around next year. And I seen a thing online today that realistically, this team needs to go out and get a couple of dudes. You need to go get a couple of guys that are really dang tough, that are tough on their own teammates, if you will. And I think that's something that maybe Musselman can think on himself. And when he does, he's going to go get some guys from the portal. Maybe instead of looking at the stat sheets quite as much, maybe watch some film on the guy's character. Yeah, maybe they only scored 6-7 points a game at their previous school, but they were an on-court leader. You could see that maybe in the film. Maybe that's the guy you go for instead of the guy that was putting up 18 a game or something. So maybe a few changes to the approach on who we go after in the portal might could help us. I don't know. That's just me spitballing, but I'm going to be excited to see kind of where the direction of the team shakes out over the next few months in preparation for next season. It's going to be a fun ride to watch. That I think there's going to be some turbulence, but it'll always be entertaining. That's for sure.
Yeah. Portal season's here, and we know Muss has been deemed the portal king, if you will, and so it'll be interesting to see the combination we have next year of guys that return that have the eligibility, and guys that maybe he necessarily even wants back on this roster. The young guys, you've got two high school kids coming in there, or 4 stars that he recruited. Like you said, he needs to go out and get a couple of those dudes. I think he needs to go out and get a big, that's for sure. Like, not a Brazil type of big, but more of a traditional 5 big that can kind of get down and beat around in the paint and that type of thing. And so we'll see. Muss is probably, if they're not already back, when he gets back, automatically starts doing homework on guys that are in the portal who might be entering the portal, guys that have already declared, and starting to piece together the roster for next season. And so we'll see how that goes. And we'll roll over as we're going to hit baseball this weekend as we do open up conference play. A quick hit on Arkansas gymnastics. They had number 1 Oklahoma come to town. Wasn't the best outing in Bud Walton in one of the final matches of the regular season. Oklahoma came out and beat Arkansas 198.350 to 197.275. Doesn't sound like a big gap, but when you start talking gymnastics, that's not a great outing there as far as the gap between scores. Yes, we got in the 197s, but when you got the number 1 team coming to town, and they're putting up a 198, it's just tough.
A 198 is huge, by the way.
Yeah.
That's crazy numbers in gymnastics, realistically. Well above, the U of A's program record. So give Oklahoma some credit there for sure.
Yeah. And not going to cover these in depth a ton. They outscored Arkansas every event. You see that reflected in the score. So Arkansas's got one more match meet left on the season as Nebraska is coming to town this Friday. So if you're not getting out to baseball, get to gymnastics in Bud Walton before the postseason starts. Next weekend is the SEC gymnastics tournament down in New Orleans. And we'll keep you updated there. You jump over to some tennis. Arkansas women's tennis lost to number 15 Alabama, number 12 Auburn, 5-2, 4-0. Arkansas men's tennis, they beat number 52 Vanderbilt 7-0, lost to number 24 South Carolina 4-3. One of the bigger news is Arkansas track and field won its 50th NCAA track and field national championship thanks to our women's track and field team, where they defended their title from last season. So back-to-back champs there. You got to love that. Arkansas, we said it last week, track capital of the world in college sports. 50 titles. That's nothing to slouch about. And, this team's always good. The men were close. I wouldn't be surprised if they're back next year. You got to love,
they finished runner-up, second place, correct?
I believe that's right.
Mm-hmm.
You had several players get awarded, scoring gold and silver in their positions, or not their positions, but their
event
that they participated in. And so, I think this track and field team is just a revolving door of talented athletes that's going to come in. And Wouldn't be surprised me if we have 51 and 52 next year.
Yep, I would agree.
So we'll jump over to Arkansas baseball now, as Arkansas had a midweek against Oral Roberts, March 12th. Arkansas won this one 4-2, so not a big spread that you saw against McNeese. Pitching, you saw a handful of guys in this one kind of just getting some extra innings in before pitching or conference play gets started. Colin Fisher, he's been your guy that's been starting these midweek games. Super talented freshman, came in, gave you 3 innings, 51 pitches. Not his best outing here. He had 3 hits, 1 walk, and 4 strikeouts, but still kept it a manageable game. You had Will McIntyre come in for 2 innings in relief, 34 pitches, 1 hit, 2 strikeouts. Stone Hewlett comes in for 2 1/3, 10 pitches, 1 hit, 1 strikeout. A guy that is that chess piece that Dave Van Horn likes to use against whatever batters he feels like he's a good matchup before. You're not going to see a ton of innings out of him. We didn't even get a full one here, so he's going to be that piece to piece or guy that Dave's going to bring in certain situations. Dylan Carter, you saw a second appearance from him, 2 2/3. Or 2/3 of an inning, 15 pitches. Not the best outing for him as he's still, working those nerves out, kind of getting back to live game action. He had 2 hits and 1 run. Cody Frank, 1 1/3 innings, 23 pitches, 2 hits, 1 run, 1 walk, 1 strikeout. So an iffy inning there for him, his outing. And then who else but Gabe Geckel coming in to close things out with the final 1 1/3 inning and 18 pitches to do it. Very efficient, 2 strikeouts there. So you got to love what you have and what you're seeing out of Gabe Geckel and the freshman is he's very much evolving into that closer that, we saw kind of Brady Tigert be, Hagan be at some points last season. So, a decent pitching outing for this pitching staff where you see some of your not as big name guys get more innings under their belts as, your other guys are getting rested up for conference play.
Yeah, I was actually pretty pleased with the way our pitchers came out. Dylan struggled a little bit, not horrible. He was actually hitting his spots well. He just had 1 or 2 pitches that held up on him, a couple hanging breaking balls that they were able to drive for some base hits that ultimately kind of got him out of the game. But he was pitching well, in my opinion. It wasn't like he was throwing erratically or anything like that. It looked like his control was there. His velocity was definitely there. He looked comfortable on the mound for the most part, even though, it was only his second outing. So got to give him some credit there. And then Cody Frank looked pretty well, in my opinion, too. He just had kind of the same issue. Had a couple of missed pitches on some fastballs that they were able to line out on him. But he didn't look terrible either. So I think from top to bottom, pretty good outing from everybody involved. Only gave up the 2 runs. There was a couple of runners left on base for Oral Roberts, and we were able to get them to hit into a couple double plays to erase some runners, things of that nature. But the big thing that stands out to me, like you said a second ago, Gabe Geckel has really been a bright spot, man. I mean, he has just really come in. He's been able to slam the door in a couple of games, give you some good innings in a couple other games, to just kind of finish things out, if you will. Not whether, be 2, 3 innings even. He's actually pitched not just 1 or 2 innings at a time in a couple scenarios and looked pretty well doing it. And so I think he's come in and really gave Dave Van Horn and Matt Hobbs a lot of confidence that, look, if we can get our starters to get us 4, 5, 6 innings, you've really only got to ask for, a handful of innings out of your kind of mid-relief guys before you can throw Gabe in there to just slam the door on whoever. It's very comforting to kind of have somebody like that in your back pocket. I think he's only going to do good things and improve as the year goes on. I've seen improvement from him from the JMU series on to now. Just with his confidence, you can tell he's becoming very confident on the mound. Not cocky at all, but you can tell that his poise is never shaken. Even when he gives up a hit or two, he was able to come in a couple games back, get into a little bit of a sticky situation and get right back out of it. So he's really had a lot of character development early in the year. I think we're really going to rely on him through conference play. He's got to, kind of keep that level of play up. It's going to be critical for us. I think to have him in that closer role, maybe share a little bit of the closing type role if Gage Wood can kind of get back on track. He's had a little bit of a rough start to the year, but I would expect him to maybe get things going and be kind of your secondary closer, if you will. So overall, good outing from the pitching staff. It's a great way to get a couple of guys some innings here and there that needed some work. So all good things.
Yeah. Then you look at the bat side of thing. Peyton Stovall came out, 2 more RBIs. So he's had a fantastic, first 5 or 4 games back. And you got to love that, it seems like he's back into midseason form, if you will, 1 for 5, but he did get those 2 RBIs. He had that 2-run single that, scored the 2 RBIs there, and then followed up by Vahiva Aloy. He's really finding and coming into his own. It was very much expected, and everybody knew all it took was that one hit that he needed, and then he kind of really start blossoming into what we thought he would be. He went for 1 for 3 in this game with an RBI and a walk, with that RBI being an RBI single. And then Kendall Diggs, Mr. Consistent, steady, a guy that you can count on that's going to come in and be able to give you those hits. 1-4 in this game. He did have a home run, an RBI. Scored Arkansas's only other run of the game with a solo home run. And so you look at his stats for the first 16 games, he is slashing for 345, 466, and 533 with 3 home runs and 12 RBIs on the season so far.
That's hard to beat right there, dude. There's some other players out there, across the country that are maybe having some better statistical years, but for Arkansas, Kendall's the guy. I mean, you've got some other really good bats in there, but Kendall has been the guy that's kind of been your steady Eddie, if you will, that's always found a way to get you a couple of RBIs in a close game, or get you a clutch home run, or start things out well, even leading off at times. And so he's kind of been Mr. Do-It-All wherever you need to play him, even if he's DHing or playing outfield or whatever. He has taken everything in stride and done fairly well with whatever he's been asked to do. And so it's good to have guys like that on your team that really kind of take everything in stride like that.
Yeah, that's true. So as we move on, Arkansas is opening conference play this weekend with Missouri coming to town. Let's preview that a little bit. You've got Ty Wilmsmeyer, Ross Lovich, 2 guys that transferred over from Missouri. They're going to see several former teammates in bomb this weekend. And you know what? You've got Arkansas, your starting rotation is going to be Hagen Smith or your Friday guy. Brady Taggart's going to come out and be your Saturday guy. And Mason Molina's going to round things out on Sunday. You jump over and look at Missouri. Guys to watch for them when you're thinking about a scouting report, if you will. On the offensive side of things with batters, a couple guys you want to watch out for. Jackson Lovich. Yes, he is the younger brother of Ross Lovich that just transferred to Arkansas, and he has had a hot start to the season with a slash line of 369, 469, and 692. He's hit 5 home runs and has a team high of 19 RBIs. He is the first baseman. He hits third in the lineup, and he shows significant power from the right side of the plate. So he's a guy that you're going to want to keep an eye out for. Other than him, you got to watch for Jackson Beeman. He's hitting 360, 346, 538, 769, and Trevor Austin. He's going 328, 461, and 787. But you look, you see these numbers from these guys, and they're pretty good numbers. But you look at a statistic that Missouri holds is no other SEC team has struck out more than Missouri has this year.
They're about to run into a buzzsaw too.
Right, I was about to say that's what I was going to say. When you think of Arkansas pitching staff, striking out is what they do to opposing batters. So, yes, you be cautious with these guys, but do what you've done all season. Hagen Smith come out and just, we can expect probably 5 to 6 innings, double-digit strikeouts. And that's what you've got to look for. And this team struggles. If they do struggle with strikeouts, I think they may be in for a rude awakening in this series, as they've got an Arkansas team that strike throwing is what they do and is one of the top teams in the country. Then you flip over to the pitching side of Missouri. The best arm for Missouri this season so far is Carter Rustin. He's their Saturday guy. He's 3-1 with a team best 2.33 ERA. He's averaging about 1 strikeout per inning and has walked just 2 batters all season. He is one of their, however, even with that being said, being their Saturday guy, he isn't projected to be a starter for this weekend, so they may want to be using him in some relief appearances. And so, with that being said, these guys, other than that, I feel confident saying I feel like Arkansas should come out and have a sweep opening SEC weekend. I don't know about you, Seth. What do you think here?
Yeah, I think the same thing. The one critical piece is, are we going to be able to translate some of the guys that were getting their bats hot over into SEC play? I think this is a great series to kind of segue into some of your tougher series later on in the year, because this isn't the worst matchup we're going to have at all, as far as opposing pitching and things of that nature, and having to score a lot of runs or something to win games. I think if we can get out there, score 5, 6, 7 runs a game, we're going to be in just fine shape to get these wins. I think of guys like Stovall, Vahiva Aloy, Kendall Diggs, depending on when they play. Ross Lovich has been playing pretty well. Wilms-Meyer's been hitting okay from time to time. Then you've had Jason Jones can come in there and absolutely hit rockets every now and then. Some guys like that really come in. And then you can't say enough about Ben McLaughlin kind of holding first base down. He's been hitting the cover off the ball as well. So there's 4 or 5 names right there that I think can carry you through this series, even if you don't get a ton of production from, Hudson White or Helfrich or whoever's catching, or some of the guys in the outfield, or whatever. I think there's enough names on this team that have shown some consistency, as we've gotten closer to SEC play, that I think we've got enough offensive firepower, especially if they kind of keep blossoming and improving as we go, that this could be a pretty good series for us, pitching wise, and then, on the offensive side of the ball as well. So, like you said, I think Missouri's about to run into a little bit of a buzzsaw. I expect some of their averages to drop just a touch, because they have not faced a rotation like ours, starting pitching wise at least, that is able to strike out teams the way that they have been. Like you said, Missouri is leading the SEC in strikeouts, from the batting side of the things. That doesn't bode well for them in my mind. So I think some of the stars might align here, and we could hopefully get some run roll games maybe. I'm not going to say that that's going to happen, but I think it's a potential possibility, if we can come out and kind of get deep into their bullpen. Hit these starting pitchers, get in their bullpen. Those Saturday, Sunday games get kind of tough if you start rattling those bullpen pitchers early on. So that's what I want to see, is us come out and really start hitting the ball well off the rip, get to their starters, and get deep into the bullpens. And this series will go well for us if that's the case.
Yeah, so true. So Missouri is coming in with a record of 9-8. Arkansas coming in with a record of 14-2, also being ranked number 1 team in the country. So it's like we said, it'll be interesting to see, especially like with the statistics that Missouri has of, being the team in the SEC that strikes out the most, put up against this very dangerous Arkansas pitching staff that what they can do on the big stage against, tougher teams. You saw the glimpses of it down in Arlington. They beat Oregon State. That's where their only loss. They're ranked top 5, right there with us. I believe at number 3. It's us, LSU, Oregon State, with their lone loss being to us. So I'm confident going into this weekend, we will win the series, if not sweep. And I think it's going to be another great weekend for opening conference play for SEC baseball. You jump over to Arkansas softball. They open up on the road at Auburn. Auburn on the season is 13-4. As you look at 13-4-1. So this is going to be, if you will consider, a little bit of a reunion for Bree Ellis, as she's going to play her former team. So I think this has the chance to be some exciting games here, where you're going to see, hopefully, like we said this past week in our Razorback recap, that consistency piece, finding somebody to step up behind Robin Herron and pitching in our pitching staff. And I think if you can combine those two things, it should be a good weekend down on the plains for this Arkansas softball team.
I think it'll be tough competition for sure. But one thing I want to hit on is it's perfect timing for Bree Ellis to be playing her former school, if you will. Is I believe she was named SEC Player of the Week last week because she was batting .632 or something across the weekend series during the Razorback Rumble. So she's done nothing but light up the stat sheet, and I couldn't be at a better time, with her geared up to take on Auburn. Obviously, the rest of the team as well, but I think she's coming in with a hot bat at the right time to have some vengeance against the Auburn Tigers, and I'll be tuning into as many of those games as possible because it's going to be explosive.
Yeah, very true. So, with that being said, Seth, for sure, myself will most likely be at the game tomorrow. So, feel free to come out, say hi, reach out to us. We'll be there. Come out and see that. As we go into upcoming events, with basketball kind of over, things are going to slow down a little bit. You've got the Arkansas softball series this weekend on the road at Auburn. Arkansas baseball has Missouri coming to town that we just previewed. Gymnastics has Nebraska coming to town Friday night at 6:45. Other than that, not a ton going on, as we're down to just really two sports now. And so with that being said, be on the lookout for this weekend. Seth and I do have an announcement that's going to be coming out sometime this weekend that's going to be big for us and that you guys might like. It's going to be exciting. So that should be sometime this weekend. And always, don't forget to like and subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. Go like us and subscribe on YouTube. That helps us a lot. We'll continue to bring you more content. We're going to get back with some of these Hog Talk segments with players. Drop us comments or, hit us up on Twitter with people you might want to hear us talk to, try to get in contact with. We'll do that. And with that, if I don't got anything else, unless you do, Seth, we'll be back with our Razorback recap on either Sunday or Monday of this next week, giving you all the key things that happened in this weekend's baseball and softball games. And with that, we'll catch you right back here next week.